I grew the wheat. Now I'm going to tell you what they did to it. And I want you to notice that I said what they did to it, not what's in it, because those are two different questions, and this country only makes them answer one of them. 12 cents. That's my end of a loaf of bread. 12 cents of wheat in something that rings up at $2.73. And the gap between those two numbers isn't the part that bothers me. The part that bothers me is what happens in the middle, and the fact that there's a legal category in the United States for things that happen in the middle that never have to appear on the label at all. Let me show you where I'm standing. I've got about 80 acres of winter wheat this year. Went in behind soybeans last fall, came off the third week of July, and it's sitting in the bin behind the machine shed right now waiting on a price. Test weight was fine. Moisture was fine. I'll haul it when the basis stops insulting me. Wheat's been running around $5 a bushel this year. USDA's got the season average at 5 even. A bushel of wheat is 60 pounds. 60 pounds of wheat gets you about 42 pounds of white flour once the mill takes off the bran and the germ. And a commercial loaf of bread uses about a pound of flour. So 1 bushel of my wheat is 42 loaves of bread. $5 divided by 42, 12 cents a loaf. That's my number. That's what I get. Now go stand in the bread aisle. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says white pan bread averaged $1.82 a pound in July across the country. A standard commercial loaf runs a pound and a half, so call it $2.73 a loaf. 42 loaves out of my bushel comes to about $115 at the register. I got 5. And here's the one that gets me, because I can check it myself without leaving the store. A 1-pound bag of all-purpose white flour was running 55 cents last time BLS priced it. 12 cents of wheat becomes 55 cents of flour becomes $2.73 of bread. Same pound of wheat the whole way down. Before I go one step further, I'm going to tell you what I am not saying, because I've watched a lot of men on the internet lose the thread right about here. I'm not telling you that supermarket bread is poison. It isn't. I'm not telling you it's toxic or that it's making you sick or that there's something in that bag that's going to hurt your grandchildren. I don't know that. Nobody's shown me that. And I'm a wheat farmer, not a doctor. I'm not going to give you one word of medical advice in the next 20 minutes. I'm not telling you every loaf in that aisle is the same, because they're not. Some of them are made about as honestly as a loaf can be made at scale. And I'm not telling you that anybody broke the law. Nobody broke the law. That's the whole point. Everything I'm about to describe is legal, published, and sitting in the Code of Federal Regulations where you or I can go read it tonight. What I am telling you is narrower than that, and I think it's worse. There is a legal category in this country for substances that get added to your food during manufacturing and never have to be written on the package. The ingredient list on the back of that bag is not a list of everything that touched your bread. It's a list of ingredients, which is a legal term with a legal boundary around it, and that boundary is drawn in a place most people have never been told about. My name's Roy. 3rd generation on 240 acres in southwest Wisconsin, the driftless and ridges and coulees, no flat ground to speak of. My grandfather bought this place in '46, coming home from the war. My dad, Raymond, worked it from '61. I came on full-time in '82 when I was 19, because Raymond's back gave out and somebody had to milk. I milked cows twice a day for 37 years, 84 Holsteins at the top. I sold the milking herd in 2019, the year Wisconsin lost 818 dairy farms, more than 2 a day. Now it's corn, beans, hay, a small beef herd, layers, and Marlene's garden, plus wheat in the rotation when the calendar cooperates. And I've got no dog in this fight whatsoever. I don't own a bakery. I don't own a mill. I don't sell flour. I've never sold flour. And I couldn't sell you flour if you begged me. The elevator pays me exactly the same $5 a bushel, whether you buy the cheapest loaf on the shelf or the most expensive one. If every one of you walked out of here and bought the same bread you bought last week, my check doesn't move a nickel. There is nothing in this for me. I'm telling you because I grew it and I want to know where it went. Here's what I'm going to lay out in order. First, the thing almost everybody misunderstands about the words on that package. Then the money, what it actually costs to make bread the slow way versus the fast way in dollars, because that's the only reason any of this happened. Then the hard part, the specific federal regulations by number that let a manufacturer leave things off your label. Then I'm going to tell you honestly what the cheap loaf does better than the expensive one, because it does several things better, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And then I'm going to give you a check you can run this week in about 4 seconds. The part that ought to get under your skin is this: nobody is hiding anything. There's no conspiracy, no backroom, no meeting. The exemption is published. It's been published for decades. The government wrote it down and put it on a public website, and then everybody just quit mentioning it, and now 2 generations of Americans have gone through the checkout line believing that the ingredient panel is a complete accounting. It isn't, it was never claimed to be, and nobody was ever obligated to tell you, stay with me. By the end of this, you'll be able to spot it on any package in about 4 seconds. If a farmer telling you what's actually in your groceries is worth your time, hit subscribe and the thumbs up. That's the only way I know that any of this is landing. So here's what most folks get wrong. You pick up a loaf and you turn it over and it says enriched wheat flour, water, yeast, salt, 4 things, maybe 5. And you think, well, that's the whole recipe. That's everything that went in. That's not what that list is. That list is the ingredients. And under federal law, an ingredient is a thing that's in the finished food doing a job. If a substance gets used during the making of the food, but the manufacturer concludes it isn't doing a job in the loaf you're holding, and it's present at what the rules call an insignificant level, it comes off the list. Legally, that's not a loophole somebody found. That's the rule, written on purpose. So the honest way to read that panel is, here are the things that are still working, not here is everything we used. And I bet the farm most people in this country have never once been told the difference. Now let's talk about why, because the why is money and it's not complicated. Bread the old way needs time. Flour, water, salt, yeast, and hours. 4 hours minimum, often overnight. That time is doing real work. It develops the gluten, it makes the flavor, it builds a structure that holds together on its own. Marlene makes it that way. Takes her most of a day and the loaf is gone in 2. Now think about time as a line item. A proof room is heated square footage sitting there doing nothing you can bill for. Every hour of fermentation is an hour of rent, an hour of climate control, an hour that your oven and your line and your people are waiting instead of producing. Cut the wait and you don't just save the rent. You run more loaves through the same building with the same crew, same ovens, same payroll, more bread. The British invented a process for that in 1961 and named it after the town the lab was in. Everybody's heard of that one. What almost nobody in this country knows is that we beat them to it by 8 years. In 1953, a doctor named John Baker, working for an outfit called Wallace and Tiernan, patented a continuous mixing machine he called the dough maker. Liquid ferment on one end, finished dough coming off the other, no stopping. Cut hours off every loaf. It ran in a lot of American plants for a couple of decades. And here's the part I like, because it's the one honest chapter in the whole story. American bakers eventually decided the bread wasn't good enough. Through the 70s and 80s, a lot of them backed off the continuous machines and went back to a slower method with a real pre-ferment, because they could taste the difference, and so could their customers. That's true, and I'm not going to leave it out. But the appetite the machine created never went away. Bakers still wanted the speed. So instead of one big machine doing it, the job got broken up and handed to chemistry, oxidizers to do in minutes what fermentation does in hours, emulsifiers to hold the crumbs soft, and enzymes, which are the quiet ones. Enzymes get used at 10 to 150 parts per million. That's a rounding error on a 100 weight of flour. They cost about nothing. and they're gone by the time the loaf comes out of the oven because the heat destroys them, which is exactly why they're the ones that don't have to be declared. The industry doesn't even hide what it likes about that. They call them label-friendly. They call them clean label solutions. Those are their words, not mine, and you can read them on any ingredient supplier's website. Then there's shelf life, which is the biggest number on the page. A preservative company ran a test on plain white yeast bread with no preservative in it. Mold showed up on day 5. Same bread with a 0.5% of calcium propionate went 16 days before it molded. 5 days to 16 days. Think about what that means to a store manager. Every loaf that goes moldy on the shelf is a total loss somebody eats, the baker or the retailer, depending on the contract, but somebody. Triple your mold-free window and you cut that loss down to almost nothing. You ship less often, you waste less, you can put bread in stores 300 miles from the plant. That's the whole thing. It's not a conspiracy. It's a spreadsheet decision. Nobody had to coordinate anything. Somebody just ran the numbers and the numbers said, swap it. Merle hauled the milk on our route for 37 years. 3 counties, 1979 to 2016. Merle could tell you which farms were going under a year before the farmers would admit it, because he saw the tank every other day, and the tank doesn't have feelings about itself. He used to say, the volume tells the truth whether you want it to or not. Same thing at the elevator. That scale ticket doesn't care how good my wheat is or how hard the year was. It's a number, and the number is the answer. Raymond used to haul wheat to a little mill about 40 minutes from here. It's not there anymore. Went in the 80s. I asked him once whether it bothered him, and he said the flour was the same flour, so what was there to be bothered about? I think he was wrong, but I understood what he meant. When the thing is a commodity, and the only question anybody asks is bushels and moisture and test weight, then it stops mattering who grew it or how. That's a thing that happened to wheat before it happened to almost anything else. If you'd rather just buy the real thing, I wrote down how. Where to find the farms, what to ask them, what a quarter of beef actually costs you a pound once it's in your freezer. It's called Buy It from the Farm. Links down in the description. All right, here's the hard part. Numbers and citations. Write them down and go check me, because I'd rather you checked me than believed me. Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 101.100, Paragraph A, Subparagraph 3. That's the one. It exempts from the ingredient list what the FDA calls incidental additives, and processing aids are named right in there when 2 conditions are met. The substance has to be present at an insignificant level, and it has to have no technical or functional effect in the finished food, both. That's the test. And here's what I'd want somebody to explain to me. The FDA has never put a number on the word insignificant. It's not defined anywhere in the regulation. Food lawyers argue about it. Some say it means undetectable. Some say it's case by case, which means the manufacturer is the one making that call in the first instance about their own product using their own judgment. That's not me alleging anything. That's how the system is built. Now go one door down. Title 21, Section 137.105. That's the federal standard for flour, and it's got a labeling paragraph in it that I think everybody ought to read once in their life. If a mill uses fungal alpha amylase, that's an enzyme, the regulation says it may be declared in the ingredient list as, and this is the actual permitted wording, enzyme, or enzyme added for improved baking. That's it. That's the whole disclosure. One word. Same section, bleaching. Flour can be bleached with any of a list of agents: chlorine, chlorine dioxide, oxides of nitrogen, benzoyl peroxide, acetone peroxides, azotic carbonamide, up to 45 parts per million. When any one of them is used, the label has to carry the word bleached. Just that word. It does not have to tell you which one. Bleached flour and bleached flour are the same 2 words on the bag, whether they used chlorine or azotic carbonamide. And then there's bromate. Potassium bromate is a dough conditioner permitted under the federal bread standard, section 136.110, up to 75 parts per million of the flour weight. The FDA asked bakers to stop using it voluntarily back in the 90s. A lot of them did. It was never actually banned at the federal level, and it's still legal today. California passed a law, AB 418, signed in October of 2023, that prohibits it in food sold in that state starting January 1st, 2027. I'm going to state that as a fact about a law and stop there. I'm not telling you what it means for your health. It's on the label when it's used, either as potassium bromate or as bromated flour, and you can decide for yourself what to do with that. Here's the last one, and it's 2 weeks old. There's a category called GRAS, generally recognized as safe. Under the system we've had for decades, a company could decide on its own that a new food substance was GRAS, put it in the food supply, and never tell the FDA it existed. Not ask permission, not notify, just start using it. The Government Accountability Office flagged that back in 2010, and on August 11th of this year, the FDA published a proposed rule in the Federal Register, docket number FDA-2025-N-3262. That would make that notification mandatory. Comments are open until December 9th. I want you to sit with what that means. The federal government just published a formal proposal to close this, which means it's real. It's not something a fella made up on the internet, and it's been open the whole time you've been buying groceries. Now let me be fair to the other side, because there's a fair case and it deserves saying out loud. That cheap loaf is a genuine achievement. It costs $1.82 a pound. It goes 16 days instead of 5, which means a family that shops once a week doesn't throw half of it away. And if you've ever been the person counting what's left in the checking account on a Thursday, that is not a small thing. It's the same every time, which sounds boring until you've had a bad batch. It gets to towns that don't have a bakery, and there are a lot of those, and there are more every year. It's enriched iron and B vitamins and folic acid, which is in there because of a public health decision this country made on purpose. And I'm not going to sit here and sneer at it. Marlene's bread does not do any of that. Marlene's bread is stale Wednesday. It costs more in flour and a whole lot more in her time. It's different every time. It's better to my mouth, and I'd rather have it. But that's a preference, and I'm not going to dress a preference up as a fact. What I will say is what it costs on my end, because that's the part nobody's tracking. When bread becomes a thing that gets engineered rather than a thing that gets made, the wheat stops being wheat and starts being an input. Nobody at the other end needs to know whose it was. They need protein and falling number and a price. And when that's all the grain is, the number of people growing it goes exactly one direction. In 2002, there were 169,528 farms in this country reporting wheat. By the 2022 census, it was 97,014, 43% gone in 20 years. Right here, Wisconsin planted 300,000 acres of winter wheat last season and 245,000 this one. And I'll leave you with the asymmetry, which is the thing I actually can't get past. Every load of grain I haul gets probed before it crosses the scale. They pull a sample, they check moisture, they check test weight, and in a wet year, they'll run it for vomitoxin because the FDA's advisory level on finished wheat products is 1 part per million, and the mill isn't taking any chances. If my number's wrong, I get docked. If it's badly wrong, they turn the truck around and I haul 800 bushels back up the hill and figure out what to do with it. I have no complaint about that. That's the job. You want to sell food to people, somebody ought to check. But then my wheat goes into a building, and inside that building things happen to it, and some of those things are legally exempt from ever being written down where I can see them. Nobody probes the bakery on the way out. There's no scale ticket for what got added and taken back out again. I get sampled. The loaf doesn't. So this week, here's what I want you to do, and it takes about 4 seconds once you know where to look. Don't start at the top of the ingredient list. Start at the first word, the flour word, and read the whole phrase, not wheat flour, the whole phrase. You're looking for 4 things. The word bleached, which tells you an agent was used, but not which one. The word bromated, the word enzyme or enzymes, sometimes sitting in the middle of a short, innocent-looking string, there's a widely sold enzyme system that shows up on labels as nothing but enriched wheat flour, enzymes, and salt. And anything that says cultured, as in cultured wheat flour or cultured dextrose, which is a preservative that got a friendlier name by being made through fermentation instead of a vat. None of those 4 words means the bread is bad. Every one of them means something was done that you now know about. Then flip to the date. Count the days from today. If it's got 2 weeks in front of it, something in there is holding it open. And you now know the 2 ways that happens. A preservative that's on the label or a system that isn't required to be. Then do the price. Compare the store loaf per pound against whatever the bakery section or the local bakery charges per pound, not per loaf, because loaf sizes are all over the place, and per pound is the only honest comparison. And if you want the other thing, the shortest list you can find on the shelf is a real option, and it's cheaper than the fancy one. It just won't make it to Friday. Tell me in the comments what state you're in and what a loaf of bread costs where you shop. Give me the size too, if you can, because I want to see the real spread across this country, and I can't get that from any government table. I read every one of these, right? And if this made you want to skip the middle of the whole thing, buy the flour, buy the grain, find somebody near you who mills. That's what the book is for. Buy it from the farm, how to find the farms, what to ask when you get there, and what it actually costs once it's in your kitchen. Links in the description. One more thing, and then I'll let you go. Raymond told me once that the reason a farmer gets cheated isn't that he's stupid. It's that he only ever sees his end of the transaction, and the other fella sees both. That's the whole business, right there. I see 12 cents. Somebody else sees 12 cents and $2.73 and every number in between, and they get to decide which of those numbers gets printed on the bag. You can't fix that. But you can stop being the only one in the deal who doesn't know the deal. Somebody grew it. Somebody changed it. Nobody told you. Now you know.